everybody, welcome to the Write or Die Show. I am your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, I am speaking with Rachael Tomayo. Hello, Rachael. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Yes. So just start with telling us a little bit about who you are.
Well, my name is Rachael Tomayo. I live in Texas. Married for 17 years, have 2 kids. I'm a former 911 operator. I am an author of 8 books. My 9th should be coming out next spring.
Nice. So 911 operator, that couldn't possibly be a very easy job.
No. I mean, it's got its days where there's really nothing happening. And I didn't work in a big city like Houston or New York or Los Angeles, but I work in a smaller city outside of Houston. But it definitely took its toll, I have to say, most definitely. I did it for 12 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty long time.
Yeah. The turnover rate is pretty crazy. I think the average is like 2 years, it used to be. I'm not 100% on that number, but it's pretty low. They don't stay for a real long time, and they end up leaving and going and doing something else. Like I did it for 12, and then I had to leave to go do something else.
I could imagine, because the calls that you get, I mean, people don't call 911 because they want to say, hey, what's going on? Everything's great. They're calling because there's an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I used to train people that were wanting to be dispatchers and 911 operators, and I would tell them, people don't call. They call because they're having the worst day of their life. Usually, most of the time, it's going to be horrible on the other end of the line, and you can only prepare so much. It does affect you. You just learn to swallow your feelings. Basically, you have this ability to turn them off, and you'll feel it later. That what causes the PTSD. That's exactly what causes the PTSD, is that ability to soldiers do it, and that's why they get it too. They swallow those feelings, they turn them off, and they're like, oh, I'll feel it later, and 20 years has gone by before it comes out, and it causes the PTSD.
Yeah. So is that something that you struggle with?
One of the reasons I left, yes. The last call, well, the last bad call I took, was involved in, was the Santa Fe school shooting.
Oh.
I was involved with that call because I was working that day, and I got a phone call from Dickinson Police Department, because they're right there with Santa Fe, and they said, we have an active shooter in Santa Fe High School, and we need your SWAT team. At the time, a combined team SWAT response, which was like 4 different cities. When our SWAT page went out, it was the SWAT team combined of 4 different cities, and that team would go out. So I paged out and our SWAT team, but when she said that, I was like, honestly, I had a hard time processing it. I was like, because I'd been to active shooter training.
Oh, okay.
I went to training in a school for response, and with the SWAT team and everything, and I still couldn't believe it. And I was like, right now? He's in there right now? And she's like, yes, he's in there right now, active. He's still in there. And I was like, okay. And I paged out our SWAT team, and they went, and they came back. Our SWAT team helped take that guy down, and they came back, and they were all upset until it was the most horrible thing they'd seen. And that day I cried all the way home. My son was 4 or 5. I think it was 5 because he was about to start kindergarten.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was terrified for him to go to school. And
Yeah.
as the months went by, I realized I had to get out of
Yeah.
it. I was like, I've got to get out of this because it's affecting me. And it was affecting me too much. And my kids are small. So I was afraid that it would affect me too much. And I was making me too afraid. And I realized that the fears I was having weren't normal fears. And I realized it was the beginnings of PTSD because of the calls I'd had, and that Santa Fe school shooting had just kind of brought it out. And
Yeah.
because that wasn't the only bad call I've had. And
Yeah.
it just kind of made me realize I was done.
Yeah.
So some time went by, and I, decided to. I looked around for a while before I got out of it, but yeah, that was the last bad call I took. It was the call that made me realize I was finished. That I couldn't do it anymore. It was a really hard
Yeah.
decision to make too. It was a really hard choice to make because I was afraid I was making the wrong decision.
Well, 12 years, I mean, that's a lot of time put into that job.
Yeah, it was
But
a hard choice to make.
yeah, but you have to make the choice based on what's best for you, best for your family.
Right.
Yeah.
And now looking back, I've had opportunities to get back into dispatching. It's been 4 years since I left, 3 years, something like that.
Okay.
And now I don't want to go back to it. Now I realize I'm I'm glad I left. I did the best for myself. Now I'm in a better place. I'm not, I've gotten past it for the most
Good.
part. There's
Yeah,
still
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
hard parts. There's some parts of it that are still kind of hard to talk about. But
Yeah.
for the most part, I'm better. So.
Good, good. So what kind of steps have you taken to help yourself deal with that?
Well, getting away from it was the first part,
Yeah.
and realizing that self-awareness that a lot of people, because whenever I did put my 2 weeks notice in, I got called into the assistant chief's office. He called me into his office and he sat me down and he asked me why I was leaving, and I told him why, and he told me he completely understood that he wished that more of his officers had done the same thing. He said, not because I don't want them to be here,
Yeah.
but because they don't have
No.
that self-awareness, or they don't want to accept it,
Yeah.
that they've reached their limit and they push themselves out, becoming complacent and numb, and they don't care anymore, and it just changes everything. And he says
Yeah.
if they had stopped when they realized it, like you are, everything would have been completely different for them.
Yeah.
He
'Cause
says you're doing the best thing you can for yourself. He's like, as much as I hate to lose a really good dispatcher, he's like, I don't want you to push yourself too far.
yeah, you have to do what's good for you. And because if you don't, you're not going to be a good spouse. You're not going to be a good parent. And eventually, you're not going to be a good worker anyway.
No, you're gonna completely lose that. You really are.
Yeah, you're going to lose yourself by just trying to muddle through the day.
Yeah.
Well, that's so good that you recognized it so that you were able to take that step back, even if it was a hard decision. I mean, most of the stuff that we talk about on this show sounds easy. Like just saying, yeah, I had to go find a new job. It sounds easy,
Right.
but it's not easy. So most of the things we say on here sound super easy to do. They never are, because they're big life changing decisions and actions.
Right.
But that's what we have to do for mental health, is change some part of our life.
Exactly. And then finding another job was a completely different problem because I was a 911 dispatcher for 12 years. So yeah, there's other forms of dispatch, but then I was overqualified for all of them. They're like, well, you're overqualified. We think you'd be great, but you're overqualified. It took like a year, to find something because of that.
I've always hated that. Excuse me. I've always hated that you're overqualified part, because if I'm applying to this job, it's because I would like it. And you were leaving a stressful job because you needed that separation from it. So finding something that maybe you were overqualified for, but was simpler mentally, that's great. But oh, you're overqualified. Like it bugs me because I've heard it before.
I think it's code for we don't want to pay you your worth.
That's exactly what it is code for.
That's what that is.
It is. It's true.
You're great for this job, but I don't want to pay you to do the job, so you're overqualified.
Yeah. Oh, that is entirely what that means.
Yes.
So what coping strategies have you learned, or which ones do you use to help manage all of that?
Stress relief. Writing, if I can find time, when I find time, writing helps me.
You must find time. You got 8 books.
Well, yeah. I have the last year, I've been kind of a slow slump, and I think the COVID and everything slowed me down, but it gets me out of my own head, and it puts me in another world, in somebody else's head, and in their own problems, and I think that helps because I'm not worried about whatever I have going on. I'm creating problems for somebody else.
Yeah. It's making that separation again from yourself to putting that break in there.
Sort of disassociating, yeah.
Yes, but in a healthy way, because you're writing. You're still getting something out.
And I weave all the stuff in there that I know, because I know so much about how people react to trauma and all the different ways, because I can't tell you how many different reactions to how many different problems I've heard, and that, people, well, you're reacting wrong. You should be feeling this way, or you should be feeling that way. No, you can't, because in a traumatic, somebody's coping mechanism may be this, and to you it may look weird, but to them that's just the way they cope, Yeah. And using that in my book to create a character that's realistic and layered and that different people can relate to. And the ability to read people, to get to I could listen to something somebody says and hear the things that they're not saying to me. I learned that when I was dispatching. Like, they would tell me things over 911 because you only have a couple of minutes to get a story out of somebody.
It's true.
And you learn as you become a more seasoned dispatcher, you start hearing the things that they're not telling you. And you start getting, that stuff. And especially with, just the worst calls. But you start picking that up, and it's not really a thing you lose, so you can become a human lie detector, you do, because you can tell when people are lying to you. And I don't know how you can just tell, those people we never saw. We never saw them. We only heard their voice, and we could tell when they were lying to us, It's just those little bitty things that I know because I did that I can put in there to make my characters more realistic.
That's good then, that you can still use the skills from there for some creativity and coping strategies.
Right. Yeah, like in my last book, Carnal Knowledge, and some of the reviews I read, it's about a woman who is assaulted over and over again, but she doesn't report it. And basically she's being targeted by what she thinks is a serial killer. And people were like, people commented because of how she reacted. And I wrote it that way on purpose because of the experiences that I've had, knowing that women don't feel comfortable reporting assault, sexual or otherwise.
Because a lot of times we're re-victimized.
Right, exactly. And she was supposed to be on probation because she's separated from her husband and in the story. And she, that night, she chose a bad coping mechanism, and she went and got drunk and got busted for drunk driving when she'd never done anything wrong in her life. It was just a bad night for her and a bad choice. She got busted for drunk driving, so she shouldn't have been out drinking in the first place. And so she was out with a friend, somebody dropped something in her drink, so she's like, oh, I shouldn't have been out in the first place. So, it was my fault because I shouldn't have been out, shouldn't have been drinking anyway, and, just all these different thoughts that she has. And women they blame themselves because everybody else blames themselves. So she's not going to say anything, and she doesn't until she's forced,
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's really realistic. Like and I mean, obviously you're drawing from real life experience
Right.
and knowledge, which is great, but so many people get hurt, get assaulted, and they just, like you said, they blame themselves. It must have been me. I did something. But nobody deserves to be assaulted ever, period.
Exactly, of course. I mean, yeah. And I read a review of the book that said the book needed to be read by everybody because of the way that it was approached, her reaction and how it was carried out through the book. But yeah, she's sort of forced to report it, because when she gets in an accident, has to go to the hospital, and the hospital reports suspicious markings on her to the police.
Yeah.
And she's forced to report what actually happened.
Good.
But yeah. Oh yeah, of course. When it finally gets out, the police, they investigate it, you know. But I mean, but yeah, there were people like, well, she should have reported it. Well, of course she should have reported it, but she didn't, because I mean, really wouldn't,
Yeah. All right. So as you're going through all of this stuff and making the decision to leave this job that you've had for 12 years, did you experience any stigma around that and recognizing your mental health?
Mine? No, I don't think anybody really thought about my mental health.
Okay.
I think it was more of every time I told people what I did, and honestly, it got a little old after a while. Like, man, you must have some crazy stories to tell. I'm sure I do, but nobody ever thought of how it would affect me hearing all that stuff, because some of that stuff you can't talk about. You can't bring it home. How was your day? But you don't really want to know.
Yeah. Do you really want to know that
really want to know
that I had to dispatch the SWAT team to a high school shooting? No, you don't want to know that.
I mean, that I had calls, the phone 911 call going in my head for 2 weeks, I couldn't sleep, that it does that. They don't think about the dispatcher the way the dispatcher is a forgotten person. It's like they think about the police officer, they think about the fireman, they think about the medics. The dispatcher is behind the scenes or behind the phone. And once the police get there, they're completely forgotten. And it's okay, because they don't do the job because they want to be remembered. They do the job because they want to help. If they wanted to be remembered, they would be doing something else. It's just, nobody cared really, or it's not, I don't know that they cared. It never occurred to them that we had mental health problems.
I think that's a really great point, because we do forget about the behind the scenes people, but you are the first people to talk to somebody. Like if somebody calls, it's just an example, maybe you've had one of these calls, I don't know. But if somebody calls and they're talking about wanting to end their own life, you are the person that has to be with them and talk to them through it until somebody else gets there. That's not an easy thing. What happens if you're unsuccessful in doing what you're trying to do and keeping them safe until somebody else is there? I couldn't do that
Right.
job. So
Yeah, most people
good for
can't
you.
do it. It's like a 2%, population. And I made a couple of TikTok videos about it, and
Love
that
TikTok.
blew up. Yeah, me too. And that blew up. And a lot of people asking me how do I become a dispatcher, and that I sent out. I told them, send me an email to my author email through my website,
Mhm.
and I'll send you some information. So I created a form letter with all the information,
Oh, neat.
and I included the personality, a very specific personality to do this job. And I'm gonna tell you right now, you'll get all the way to the very end of training, and you could still fail.
Yeah.
I mean, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't count anything against you. It's just a very few people can make it.
Yeah.
It's just for you to be, really. There, if you
Mhm.
want to help people and you don't make it, there's plenty of other places you can help people.
Yeah. And so I used to be an employment counselor, and just doing that job, there was some tragic stories that came into my office, but not even close to the degree that you would have experienced. And even then, that little bit of traumatic stories kind of pulled at me, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta leave this here." But it's not an easy thing to do. And actually, one of my coworkers back then, I've been out of it for 4 years. Yeah, let's go with that. So one of my coworkers back then, she actually left employment counseling and became a dispatcher.
Mm-hmm.
And she did have one of those personalities that could really separate from those really hard stories to going home after. And I guess she's still doing it. I don't know. We weren't that close, but I think
Right. Mm-hmm.
it was a great decision for her. But like you're talking about with this personality thing, she had the right personality. Not everybody does, like you said.
Yeah, you really do have to be able to do that. And you can only do that to a certain degree, even those people, because
Yeah.
you are going to get a call. You are going to get one. And eventually you will, that bothers you, that will always bother you, and I never felt like I did anything. I never had one that was like, if I had done it different, maybe it would have gone a different way. I've never had one like that.
Oh,
It
good.
was just I never turned it around on myself that way. It was
Good.
more just uh that was horrible, that was just more than I should have ever had to hear. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Because dispatchers have to hear things that nobody should ever have to hear.
it's true.
Um
And as you're talking now, it's just popped into my head. And so I figure I'll share because that's what I do, random thoughts. And so we're by the time this episode airs, it'll be a little while in between the recording to when it airs. But I'll let everybody know. So we are recording right now, and as anybody who follows the channel, they know that my brother has just passed away 3 weeks ago.
I'm so sorry.
And thank you. And thinking about now the dispatcher who had to get that call saying whatever was said, I wasn't the one that called, but talking about how this person is maybe dead and we need somebody or whatever, that couldn't have been easy. And I didn't think about them. So you're really kind of changing my mindset. And now I'm like, oh, I wonder how they felt afterwards. I hope they were okay. I hope that they were able to unwind about this young man that is no longer with us. I hope they're able to unwind and go home and feel good.
Well, it's like you have this horrible thing happening to you or whoever that calls. The last thing you need to worry about is how the dispatcher is feeling on the other end of the phone. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
They're not ever going to be, they understand that they're not, the police even are probably just as forgotten. They're going to be a blur. They're not going to remember that face, odds are. It's okay that they're there to help in whatever way they help. And as long as they helped, that's okay. They don't need to be remembered. That's why they do it.
Yeah.
So,
It just,
we
I
get
just
our
had
own
never
help.
thought
You know what
about
I mean? It's
I just had
they
never,
do.
I'd never taken the time to think about it. So now that I'm talking to somebody who was a dispatcher, I'm kind of stopping and thinking, because I mean, I've had to call 911 plenty of times and on my child for meltdowns. Just so my youngest has autism. A lot of people on the show, if you follow the show, you kind of know the story. And it got to the point that violent meltdowns or suicide attempts, they required a phone call. They required sometimes police to help us de-escalate, and sometimes paramedic to take to the hospital to get to the children's ward because we couldn't safely get him there ourselves. And I know that when basically every single time I'm talking to the dispatcher, I'm crying, and their level of calmness is amazing. Like, wow. And I never really stopped to think, after I hang up and they get off the phone with me, I wonder if they're gonna need to go, oh, that poor mom, right? Like, maybe, because I'm crying. Most times when you hear somebody cry, you see somebody cry, usually those emotions kind of transfer a little bit. Same with a smile. A smile can make other people smile. Tears act the same way. So just kind of food for thought. I've never thought about it before, and I'm thinking about it now.
There is a lot of disassociation there, and the calmness too. Funny you should say that, because I've had 911 calls played on TV, and one of my 911 calls was made into it wasn't Investigation Discovery. It was another channel, but it was made into one of those TV mysteries, like on Investigation Discovery. Yeah, and honestly, I didn't even know about it. Not me, but the call. It was funny because I didn't even know until this trainee that we had come in. She's like, "Oh, hey, I heard that call. They made a whole show about it." And then she looks it up and she plays the call back to me on the TV show. She looked it up while she was sitting in dispatch. It was about a teenage girl that had been murdered by her boyfriend. And I took the call, and she goes, you're so calm, you're almost deadpan, you know. And I'm like, well, you're supposed to be. I mean, you have to be, because mom's hysterical, and if I'm hysterical, how's that going to help?
Oh, it's true, but again, we don't think about it.
It's not because we don't care. If we didn't care, we wouldn't be here. The calm is a tactic. It's a tactic to calm the person on the other end of the phone, to keep them at some level, you know, or they're, you know, manageable. But yeah, it's like if I start freaking out with her, then we're both just a mess. I mean, we have to stay deadpan. You can't, you know, there are dispatchers that do get emotional on the phone. Yeah, I've heard them.
Yeah,
but yeah, they used to tease me about it.
I think that's kind of cool. You're famous. People will never know it's you, but you know
my voice. But
exactly, it's all good. So what would you tell somebody who's listening right now and they're maybe starting to experience the starting signs of PTSD?
Well, the reason you're experiencing the PTSD is because there's feelings in there that you don't want to experience. Odds are, I would say, find a way to get those feelings out. Talk about them to somebody. Find a way to release it, the stress, get away from the situation. Like I did, I stopped it and then got away, and then spent some years just working it out. But I think finding somebody to talk to in some way or another will help.
Yeah.
Don't let it get too far. Don't let it get too far. If you can, recognize it early and stop it as soon as you notice it, and get away from the situation if possible. Because I know if you're in the military or somewhere, there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
because you're in the military. But you can take measures to help your mental health by talking to somebody about it. So it's not as bad as it would be.
Yeah, that is great advice for somebody. So now let's talk about what you've written and where people can get a hold of it.
Okay. I have written several books. I started out writing romance. I have all my titles, all my everything available pretty much everywhere. You can see everything on my website, RachelTomayowrites.com. The Deadly Sin series, Break My Bones and Carnal Knowledge, are out now. It's basically a thriller, psychological thriller series.
Oh, that's my jam.
I love it. This Carnal Knowledge has the absolute shocker of an ending, so twisted. It was such a good ending.
Those
and
are my favorite.
Nobody has guessed the ending of that book. Nobody has guessed it.
Oh,
Nobody.
I need it now. I need it now.
Nobody's guessed the end of that book.
Now I need it so I can try and guess.
The third book, you knew, is I would really like I want people to try and guess, but so far nobody has. They're like, I really thought I knew who it was, but I really didn't know.
So what you're telling me, this is what I'm hearing. I need to read it and assume who has already been guessed as the killer so that I know it's not them, to pick the person that they wouldn't have picked.
I really don't think anybody's going to get it.
Challenge accepted.
You never know. Mm-hmm. I challenge you all. The third book in the Deadly Sin series is due out in February of next year, and it is very twisty, and seriously, you're not really going to know what's happening in that book until you're done with it.
All you're doing is telling me more and more things I need to read.
Yeah, that one is due out in February of next year.
Nice. So something to look forward to. Yeah. So in other words, read all your stuff right now, because then come February, then you're good to go.
Exactly.
I love that. And then, so where can people follow you?
I am on TikTok. I'm not. I do have some stuff. Honestly, I'm a bit of an introvert, so coming up with videos is not that easy. But
okay, hold on. Do you have a pet?
Do I have a pet? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Problem solved.
Right.
All I follow on TikTok for the most part, or 95% of what I follow on TikTok, animals. If you have a cute animal, I am down.
Mm-hmm.
My animals have their own TikTok.
I do have Facebook. I have Twitter, but I'm not really active on it. But yeah, you can contact me through my website. You can email me through there. You can stay up to date. You can follow my newsletter, all that stuff.
Awesome. And those links will be down in the description below, so you can give Rachel a follow and get a hold of those creepy, crazy, don't know what's going to happen books. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts or anything to share before we say goodbye?
No, just while you're taking care of everybody else, make sure you take a minute to take care of yourself. Because I am the worst, absolutely the worst about doing that.
I love that. Maybe we need to turn that into a show, a shirt. Take a minute, take care of yourself.
I'm the worst about doing it. I'll take care of everybody else till I'm exhausted and then be mad because I'm exhausted.
Well, maybe you'll see that in the merch store one day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel, so much for joining us and sharing and giving us kind of something else to think about.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So she was a lot of fun. So after we chatted a little bit, not long enough for the Patreon page, but we chatted a little bit because she's in Texas and I'm recording right now at kind of the end of spring, beginning of summer here in Canada. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything over the summer in my basement. I just want to be outside. And she goes, oh, it's blazing hot here. So it's always funny getting to meet people from all over the place. I love it. So if you do want to become a patron, head on over to the Patreon page. We do have some behind the scenes footage with some guests, and I do post some extra material that I write. As well, of course, we have our merch store. 10% of the proceeds go back to the Canadian Mental Health Association or the addiction services if you purchase from our special line. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly.